today, the way we drink and deliver water is completely broken, right? So if you look at the global bottled water sector, it's a $300 billion market growing at 6% a year. So growing at a very rapid pace.
Is that not a disaster?
It is. It's an absolute disaster. 525 billion single-use plastic bottles. Only around 10% of these, probably a little less than that, are being recycled annually.
See, I hear what you guys are saying. Plastic is something that we shouldn't be using anymore. Explain to me the alternative.
What we are seeing now with kind of this whole new revolution in terms of technology in farming, technology in medicine, technology in artificial intelligence is going to lead to a new kind of abundance that I don't think even the best planners are aware of right now.
Do you feel like you've earned battle stripes from keeping the ship afloat during historical turmoil?
The first day that you set up a company is the most likely time that it's going to fail. And every day that goes by and every day that passes, you're reducing that likelihood of failure.
Throughout your career, have you seen like a common denominator that stops people from achieving their goals?
At an altitude of 37,000 feet, we soar, with a rich legacy of honoring our guests and a unique style that has resonated with the world for 78 years. We carry the name of our country on every journey and across every sky. We are Saudi. We welcome you in our own way. We shape our present and build our future. Saudia, our name and country, our style and approach, striving for excellence in everything we do. This is how we fly.
So this takes you back a long way, huh?
It does. It does. Tim Hortons takes me back all the way to freezing cold hockey arenas and skating lessons and things with my parents and friends.
Born in Canada, you lived the first few years of your life there?
Born in Incubayte, actually.
Born in Saudi Arabia.
Born in Saudi Arabia, in Incubayte.
Give us the story.
I was born in the Fuad Abdullah Hospital. Excuse me, let me repeat that. So I was actually born in the Abdullah Fuad Hospital in Saudi Arabia. So my parents had been living there for over a decade by the time I was born. I am the youngest of 4 children, and quite a bit younger, actually. So my next youngest is 8 years older than me. So I was a pleasant surprise, you could say, to the parents. And I think that the memories that I have are quite limited in reality. You know, I was 3 years old when I left to Canada, but there are so many stories that I heard growing up, and so many fond memories that the parents and my siblings would always refer to about their time in Saudi Arabia. And one thing that moved with us that wasn't part of the family, but was actually part of the family, was our car. We had a 1980 or 1981 metallic silver Mercedes S-Class that my parents moved with them to Canada.
I know exactly which one you're talking about.
And it had a kind of a blue velourish interior. Beautiful car, and very unique to Toronto at the time as well.
Okay, so I'm going to Google it, and I'm not going to write 1980. I'm going to write 500 Mercedes SEL, Mercedes SEL, and I'm telling you, it's going to come up. Give it to me, Sami. It's one of those, right?
It's one of those. It was I think it was actually that one right there.
The light blue one?
The light blue one, yeah. With a blue interior as well. And it wasn't leather, it was...
Wow.
It was...
Put it up on the screen right now. Those things lasted for...
They're tanks.
God, I see them on the road today in Saudi.
Yeah.
They're tanks.
They don't build them like they used to.
Absolutely not. This thing was metal and made with love, and the production line wasn't churning out thousands of cars a day. It was maybe tens of cars a day, you know.
Exactly.
Some love went into it.
Most definitely. And on that car, we had a sticker that said Sunset Beach.
Okay.
And I think that was the access pass to our beach club membership in Incubayte back in the day. And that was where I think a lot of formative memories were made for my siblings and my parents. And the stories I hear about life in the 70s and early 80s around Khubar and Dammam were incredible, right? I think it was a real community. Everybody kind of was going to the same community centers and schools, and seemed to be a very pleasant place to be living, and a very dynamic place. Tons of growth, tons of opportunity, a lot of parallels to, I think the last few years again, and as well as I think the reason why I moved in the mid 2000s to the UAE is this resurgence and this boom in the Gulf, which is really attracting people from all over the world to come here, set up shop, and really try to follow some kind of dream and build something around it.
September 11th did a lot of that migration or re-migrating back to where you came from. I mean, I was one of them. I was in school in Boston and I couldn't get my visa renewed.
Yeah.
And I thought it was the end of the world. My cousins thought it was the end of the world. Then I had some friends and cousins in Dubai said, actually, there's a new world here.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and I honestly never looked back.
Most definitely. And I think growing up in Toronto, I moved when I was 4 years old. We were very exposed to multiculturalism in its entirety. So from a very young age, we were in the households of people of every ethnic background, and usually, their parents were migrants or recently immigrated, or if that maximum 2 generations before that. So one thing that Canada always referred to itself as, let's say with the cup here, is a cultural mosaic, where the U.S. was always a melting pot. And I think the model that I see here and I see followed here is a lot more of a mosaic, which is bring your culture with you, and it's very accepting. And that structure really reduces the instances of the stereotype or the reason why you would be uncomfortable or unable to go back to the U.S. after Boston, right? It's getting a deeper understanding of a culture really creates, I think, an ecosystem in its entirety, which goes beyond the stereotypes. And that's what I really have been enjoying. Kind of, I was very fortunate, and I think it wasn't my choice, but it was the decisions of my parents. And I think, the culture that we entered going into Canada, and then moving to the UAE, and seeing now across, I think, Saudi and the broader region as well, the ability for cultures to come in, bring some of the best that they have, some of the other things that they bring with them as well, and really, influence and integrate, but not have to all melt together, but live in a very cohesive fashion, and really be able to kind of build and grow from that point onwards is a very, it's a wonderful model, and it's one that I'm very happy to see my kids growing up in right now as well.
Yeah, multiculturalism is something that I very much appreciated there, because I have friends from countries who I would have never have been able to say that I have friends in that country because of Dubai. A global village. I see why they called that part of town global village. Dubai kind of is like a global village, because when I lived there, Sami, the abayas in Saudi were very much mandatory. Culturally, it was mandatory. You had to, you just don't go out not wearing one. And then I'm like walking by, and I'd look at a Costa or a restaurant, Paul Cafe, and there'd be a lady in hot shorts, I think is what they call it, and then another one who's munaqqaba next to her. But neither one cares or is aware that you are wearing what you're wearing. Lakum dinukum waliya din is one of my favorite ayahs in the Quran. This is you do you, I do me, and when it's all said and done, we will have to answer to someone. Not now, but eventually. You put in time from 2007, started a company, co-founded a company, and today, you see what's happening in the UAE, you see what's happening in Saudi, and you kind of, beat a lot of people to it who are now turning their attention to the region 15 years ago when you came. You looking back at that, is that one of, do you look at that move in a very proud way? Is it one of your proudest moves in taking a risk, getting out of your comfort zone, starting from scratch per se? A lot of risk comes with that. How do you reflect on that moment in your life?
Well, Mo, I think if we look at that time, so 2007, I was very fortunate in the way that I ended up landing into the UAE. I had my siblings had all somehow moved to either Dubai or Abu Dhabi before me. So I had the chance to visit multiple times from 1998 all the way until 2007 when I moved. And that was really kind of the period of when I was in university and then starting my first company, which was an oil and gas company that was based in Toronto, but had assets in the region, investors and business development opportunities in the region as well, which we centered out of Dubai at the time. During those travels, I would just get more and more excited about the opportunity that was in front of me in terms of what was going on in the UAE at the time. Dubai was going through a massive boom in terms of real estate development, general development. Abu Dhabi had set up multiple development companies and had set up massive initiatives to focus on economic diversification. And these plans were not just, I think, plans on paper. They seemed very real. There was boots on the ground. There was a sense of excitement. And as somebody who inherently was entrepreneurial in nature, I felt crazy not to be in the middle of it at that point in time. So in 2006, I was traveling to Abu Dhabi to visit one of the funds based in Abu Dhabi that had oil and gas interests, because we wanted to see if there was any assets we could acquire from them for our company, which was publicly listed at the time. So we thought there was an arbitrage to buy
in Toronto, publicly listed in Toronto.
Publicly listed in Toronto. So maybe I can go backwards a little bit. So in 2004, I co-founded a company called Candax Energy. And Candax was really a marriage of the Canadian capital markets and oil and gas opportunities in the Middle East and North Africa, starting off with Tunisia. So we, through our network, we were able to access an gas field in Tunisia, which was pretty much an orphaned asset. It belonged to a construction company. They had no plans on developing it, but the Canadian capital markets were extremely active at that point in time. And there was the beginnings of a boom in terms of oil and gas investment. This was 2004. Oil was sitting at around $30 a barrel before it kind of spiked up to 140 exactly in a very short period of time. So we were able to utilize kind of initially private investment from the Canadian capital markets to build a company and acquire this gas license, really, the ability to drill. And over that period of time, I was 24 years old at this point after university. I was really focused on the business development side of things. We had two other co-founders that were much senior to me, and I learned a tremendous amount from them, and then ultimately the team that we hired around them as well. And I was just very fortunate because this was probably the quickest MBA or deep dive into entrepreneurship or any energy entrepreneurship you could possibly get, because we were looking at, acquiring assets and doing such things. And I was very quiet at the time, just listening and trying to understand what was going on and trying not to make a fool of myself in terms of saying the wrong thing or representing the wrong thing in the meetings. And we were able to acquire these assets and then raise significant capital. And within 2 years, we kind of went from idea to an IPO.
Unheard of-ish.
Generally it is unheard of, but Toronto's a very unique place, and it's a very entrepreneurial market with a history of entrepreneurship in resources. So since, for over 100 years, for over 150 years, there's been a very large mining economy that has come out of Ontario and really kind of led by the Toronto Stock Exchange as well. And in 1999, there was something called the Toronto Venture Exchange, which was launched. And that's effectively a public venture market with a real focus on, historically, with a real focus on mining and oil and gas. And in a strange way, there are a lot of parallels between mining and oil and gas and venture. And the reason I say that is you need to take a portfolio approach as an investor, and eventually you're going to hit that unicorn or gold mine. And they're quite similar. The chances of hitting one, the reasons why you invest, whether that's the people who are looking at it, whether it's the geologists or the founders, and ultimately you shouldn't just be betting on one. You need to take a real portfolio. So I started, and this whole business started out of a a venture builder and an incubator focused on building a number of these companies, looking at different assets, mostly focused on Ontario. But when I joined the company, we branched out to the Middle East. And it was just a really, really exciting space and time because it was tremendous growth. It was a period of real excitement in the world of energy. I think oil and gas became a very hot topic. If you recall the super spike conversations, and oil kind of hit $200 and such things. And we were in a very small way right in the middle of it as a small Canadian company with assets in Tunisia. We ended up acquiring around 2,000 barrels a day of production in Tunisia as well.
2,000 per day?
2,000 barrels a day of production. And then we raised...
It's a big number, that.
It's a big number, yeah. And we raised significant capital to start drilling for more. And over that period of time, I was involved both on the capital raising side as well as the business development side to try to find further opportunities to roll into this company. And in 2006, I was visiting Abu Dhabi, and I was visiting the offices of Mubadala's energy and utilities team. It was still a relatively nascent company as well. And I was asking about potential assets that they might have that we could, that they were too small for them, or something they've seen that was too small for them that we could take a look at. And somehow the conversation pivoted into, we don't have any assets like that, but we'd love to introduce you to our new initiative, which is an initiative that was yet unnamed, but the goal was to make Abu Dhabi a global center in renewable energy. And the idea was to invest tremendous capital into the domestic sustainability ecosystem, but beyond that, also invest in global companies and projects to really make the UAE and Abu Dhabi an epicenter of it. And I thought that just sounded like an incredibly exciting idea. And my roommate and co-founder afterwards, and very good friend, was a solar engineer. So it was funny, we were living in a house in apartments in Toronto, and one of us was an oil and gas guy, the other was a solar engineer. And I went back to him, and it was actually January in 2007, so it was freezing cold in Toronto. And I said, listen, I got on the plane in Abu Dhabi, and it was 25 degrees. I landed in Toronto, it was minus 25 degrees. And I thought, this is probably the last winter I want to do here right now.
Talk about polarization.
Yeah, exactly. And so I spoke to my good friend and roommate and said, would you be interested in starting a solar company in Abu Dhabi? And within 4 months, we had built up a business model, raised capital. I had exited my position from the oil and gas company. We had brought on another co-founder, and we moved in July 2007 to Abu Dhabi, where the weather was actually much worse than Toronto at the time. So I probably picked the wrong time to move, and we started Enviromena, which was the first solar company in the region. And that was really a very pivotal, I think, time in terms of that shift, and really presenting, the opportunity was presented, and I had multiple visits to the region. And it takes one of these large announcements or strategies that come from the leadership, and that, I think come from government programs, large development programs, to attract the human capital at the time to really build something around that. And we're seeing, that was a rare example in terms of sustainability. Fast forward today, there are so many incredible programs, initiatives, and investments coming out of Saudi Arabia, coming out of the UAE, coming out of the broader region, which if we look at the size and scale of what we need to do to be able to build kind of sustainable economies moving forward, it's going to take, tremendous entrepreneurship. It's going to take tons of capital, and it's going to take a real, I'd say, coordinated effort amongst policymakers, amongst companies, entrepreneurs, and most importantly, I think the grassroots individuals to be able to implement that change. And it's incredibly exciting.
So just let me get this straight. Question. It took only a year and a half or 2 years in the job that you were at before you co-founded Enviromena
Yeah.
for you to realize that this is something that you want to, like a space that you want to enter on your own with the 2 years experience you had in the mining industry and no previous experience before then?
No.
So 2 years, the question is, it took 2 years for you to say, this is something that I want to do, to the point where I'm going to invest my own money in a company and found it based on the 2 years of experience that I got in the business.
Yes, but I think it was a very skewed decision. And the reason it was skewed is I thought that you start a company and within 2 years you've IPO'd and you're on the stock exchange. So our business model and our strategy was one which had a very short kind of period of from investment to monetization.
Okay.
And again, that was 2004 to 2006, oil and gas, a market that was just booming like no other. We founded Enviromena in 2007, shortly after we had a global financial crisis. And shortly after that, we had, with the Arab Spring, a lot of volatility with a lot of the markets that we were looking at in the region. So what was a 3-year business plan and strategy ended up being an incredible 11-year journey. There's absolutely no regret in terms of how long it took. And it was an incredible lesson in terms of persistence, and sometimes massive challenges would be in front of us. And I was very fortunate to have a co-founding team with me that was able to kind of ride that journey, because it would be very lonely to go through that at that age.
Yeah. So you were spoiled with the first experience, IPOing in 2 years.
Most definitely.
It reminds me of a rookie winning a championship on his first year.
Exactly, and that's a perfect example.
I would say Celtics in 2008, but you'd rather talk about the Toronto Raptors.
We only have one in 2019, so
and what a championship that was. But yeah, I mean, you got into it thinking that it must be this easy going forward, and then challenges, Arab Spring, you say, global financial, like you couldn't have witnessed a more bumpy road between, and they were like 2 years apart.
Most definitely. And we were raising capital in the UK. This was in 2008. We were doing a round of funding, and we were meeting with a fund, and this is exactly when Lehman was collapsing. And I remember trying to pitch our company. It's solar 07, 08, and a solar company in Abu Dhabi. I'm sitting there giving my pitch deck, and I'm seeing this guy literally trying to hold back the tears in his eyes because of what was going on. And it was a very, very challenging time to be raising capital. But I think it was also very valuable, because I think that polarity of how easy it could be versus how hard it can be, we take it for granted. And I think during every cycle, everybody feels like the smartest person in the world when it's on the way up and everything seems very easy, and on the way down, the panic kicks in. So the ability to levelize and realize that cycles do happen, and history may not repeat itself, but it definitely rhymes. Following that pattern of actual cycles is extremely, I think, helpful as somebody who's now been in a few of them as an entrepreneur.
But do you feel that you have benefited from that? Do you feel like you've earned battle stripes from keeping the ship afloat during historical turmoil?
I think so, and I think from my vantage point, it seems like historical. I think historical challenges, but maybe from the broader context of history, it's a pretty small challenge, right? I think it was a small bump. COVID was a big bump for a lot of people, and I think that was more than just a bump in terms of business, and I think it was a life bump, and one which I think a lot of us we benefited from those scars. We got to take a step back and reassess and maybe prioritize things that were not necessarily focused on before the great COVID.
Yeah, totally. Panic selling is a real thing, and I don't mean selling when the market is red. I mean across so many different verticals. Keeping a calm and collected head is probably one of the best things you can learn with age. it's crazy what you can do when keeping a cool head. When we spoke on the phone, you mentioned how you have found comfort, and I took note of it here, found comfort with the fear of failure, which was just a beautiful, liberating statement or comment that I took a note of, and I think it's a way to live life. Is there a circumstance that you can highlight or pinpoint in how you found comfort in the fear of failure?
My investors, peers, co-founders, board, everyone who kind of is around you, will always, give you advice and nuances, and most advice will come with the pretense of, making sure it works, make sure it works out and everything. And if you build just around protecting and around protection of failure, then you will move too slowly to succeed in a lot of markets, and to be able to make an impact. So the need to go fast and the need to build things really increases your likelihood of failure. And I'm of the viewpoint, I think you definitely need co-founders and those around you to equalize this viewpoint. Is we need to just keep doing, keep challenging. And if you are failing, have small failures quickly, right? And we call them micro pivots effectively. And learn very quickly from these failures and keep going. Because if you're afraid of testing something out, whether that's a product into the market, or that's an idea, or that's hiring a new member of the team, all of those different things will stop you from moving forward. And I think we need to flow very quickly as young companies in the region with potential that is massive in front of us, whether that's in water or energy or whatever the case may be. And you do sometimes have to just jump into these opportunities head first, studied, right? You have to hopefully know how to dive at this point, but you if you have that fear of jumping into the opportunities, then they'll never happen. So that fear of failure is something that I'm oddly comfortable with, and the learnings that you get from those failures allow you to become, as you touched on, you get the worst cards, you're more resilient, and you'll do it better the next time around.
Because you kind of want to, I like what you said about getting your failures out there quickly and early. What's your relationship like with the word experimenting and trying new things? We were
experimenting before actually distributing with the flavor and texture of our water. We have a water sommelier on our advisory team, and we have a mineral filter. So the taste of the water and the texture of the water is something that's critical. And we were doing so much testing in terms of the quality in the middle of the road. And one thing is, we all come with our biases. So I love this kind of water, you love that kind of, whatever the case may be. We really ended up going with that middle of the road flavor and texture that was the most popular. Right? And it's interesting because there's that contact, there's the same kind of going back to the mean. And I do feel like the mean is where you want to be for a lot of these, for a lot of these things that are for mass distributions, mass consumption, is you do want to be able to attract and impact as many people as once. And experimentation allows you to understand what that mean is very often as well.
So water and the use of plastic is clearly a problem that it's a global problem. Yes, some countries and regions do it better than others. Could we be doing more to accelerate our recycling efforts, which clearly is on the list of sustainability and recycling is high on the list of, at least I can speak on behalf of projects in Saudi and governmental projects. Sustainability is on there. Where does recycling and sustainability, how does that all play in? I mean, I want to hear it from the expert that you are.
So, I think you said that could we be doing it better as a region? I think globally we need to be doing it better. Around 525 billion plastic bottles are used just for the water sector globally. So 525 billion single-use plastic bottles, only around 10% of these, probably a little less than that, are being recycled annually. That's a massive problem. If we zoom into Saudi, it's estimated last year around 15 billion single-use plastic bottles were used for the water industry, and around 5% of those were recycled. So do we have a massive issue in front of us right now when it comes to single-use plastic waste? The answer is yes. It's around 14.5 billion plastic single-use bottles were put into landfills last year. The good news, and it is very good news, is over the past couple of years, the Saudi Green Initiative has set a target, which I'm very confident they're going to be able to achieve, to go from 5% to 15% of all plastics being recycled. And that is a huge, huge outcome. We're talking billions of bottles left out of landfills and recycled. We're seeing similar programs throughout the region as well, and really the nascent and early days of recycling programs at scale. That's great, and I think that's very important. But what we want to see and what we want to focus on is reducing the amount that needs to go into the recycling bin anyways.
I have a no plastic policy in my house.
Which is brilliant. And you can do it. And I think no plastic and sustainability used to come at a cost. And that cost was a lower quality product or a higher economic cost or a true lack of convenience across the board. Today, you can be sustainable with a better product at a lower price with more convenience. And I think those three pillars are really going to be what accelerates the transition. And what I love about a lot of the environmental programs, sustainability programs, is there are numbers and targets that are set by governments kind of from the top down, but ultimately the economic drivers and the grassroots purposes and reasons are what actually accelerate that change. We've seen it with EVs, we've seen it with renewable energy, and I expect we're going to see it with water as well.
جديد اكسر الروتين مع أطباقنا الجديدة من بيتزا هات جدة. بيتزا هات جدة، ذوق طعم الثقة معنا.
On the subject of water purification, at least, people in the States feel more comfortable drinking out, at least like my family members, they feel more comfortable drinking out of the tap there, but not in the Arab world. What do we need to do to feel comfortable to drink out of the tap?
So maybe I'll start off with drinking out of the tap in the US.
Okay.
I wouldn't be that comfortable without any purification.
Oh, really?
Yes. And the reason is recent studies have indicated that there is 200 million people in the U.S. have something called forever chemicals, PFAs, found in their tap water, and that leads to there are a number of studies that shown that creates a reduction in the impact of vaccinations. It has a carcinogenic impact. It impacts kidney and liver functions. So there are a number of reasons why PFAs are quite dangerous.
This is all from drinking out of the tap.
This is found in 200 million American. And what happened was the EPA had a certain threshold and then realized for it to have a negative impact on your health, that threshold had to be dropped by a few orders of magnitude. And when that threshold was dropped suddenly, and instead of 30 million people having PFAs in their water, 200 million people had PFAs in their water. So purification of tap water is something that's quite critical. The municipal level and at the municipal level and everything, water is being treated and purified. But the challenge is once you get to that kind of last mile, so pipes in your building, older buildings throughout the States, Canada, globally, that last mile is something which is very hard to control for. So we call it point of use filtration. Filtering exactly when you're going to drink the water is that incredibly important step to ensure that what you're drinking is actually not just clean enough, but very, very clean, purified, refreshed, and freshly filtered. It's an interesting thing, but we've learned a lot about when you filter the water as well, because transportation, whether that be in a plastic container or that be in a or that be coming out of the tap, is quite important to take as a factor in terms of the quality of the water.
I've seen devices that go on the end of the tap that appears to purify, yes. Yeah. Or jugs that just hang around there that you pour tap water. I've definitely seen my mom do this, that she'd pour it into this filter and then drink from whatever's being filtered. Yeah,
the Brita filter.
The Brita. Thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the Brita gets rid of that first layer of purification. It works to an extent. It gets rid of kind of the chlorine and a few of the other things, but there's so much in there, right? Nowadays,
you wouldn't feel comfortable drinking out of it.
Personally, no. I think as I've learned a lot more and have taken a deep dive, and to the extent that I've gained a bit of a domain expertise in what's in tap water and then what needs to come out of tap water, I believe we need to do a process called RO, reverse osmosis, in the water, which filters it and basically strips the water of everything down to very, very low micron level. And what we do is we remineralize the water to add flavor and texture again and to bring it back to life.
Mm-hmm. I was in the States 5 years ago, and I remember taking off from LAX, and the number of solar panels I saw on the roofs was quite staggering. I'm like, these guys are really taking full advantage of the sun. Sun hits Saudi, 365 days a year, and even on a cloudy day, you are able to. Is there a reason why the region hasn't adopted solar for end use? I'm talking panels on top of your house. Where are we with the adoption of that?
So it varies from country to country in the region, and I probably can take a deep dive into both Saudi and into the UAE, where we've had experience building some of these rooftop plants as well in my previous company. The use case for putting solar on a roof is actually perfect here, because our difference between what we call peak energy demand, which is in the middle of the day when the air conditioning is blasting, and probably people are in the factory or warehouse or office, whatever the case may be, is substantially higher than the base, which is just kind of the average amount of energy. And solar produces electricity exactly during that peak time. So what you're doing is you're displacing the highest cost part of the power production curve. Now, what would be required to allow for these programs, and I think Dubai was one of the first ones to do it with something called the Shams Dubai program, is something called net metering. So when I produce this electricity, I'm allowed to put it back into the grid. Only in the last couple of years has that been mandated, allowed here as well. And so the rollout is yet to happen. But when it does happen at scale. And we did see that in Dubai, where gigawatts of solar was put in kind of on ground mounted and on top of buildings. And I think the potential here in Saudi is incredible. And the target has been set. So today we're probably around 1% of energy coming from renewable resources. The target is to be at around 50% by 2030, which is a massive, it's a massive opportunity, but it is highly achievable. The reason it's achievable is the technology exists, the policies now exist, and now it's just a function of deployment. So there are single projects that are currently under development, have been awarded in Saudi, that are larger than the entire existing kind of solar installed capacity. So we're going to see, I'd say, exponential change over the next decade in terms of how much solar is rolled out, both kind of the massive plants in the desert, kind of producing at the city level or the municipal level, as well as the distributed solar projects on rooftops as well. And the reason I'm so confident in this is not just the policies, but the economics. The cost of production of solar. So I'll just give a bit of a story. And we built the first solar power plant in the region in 2009.
Is that Masdar?
For Masdar, exactly.
Okay. And are you impressed, Rani?
Yes, I'm very proud.
They marketed it so well. It was on all the mainstream news channels. Like they really pushed it.
And what we loved about the ad that we often saw was front and center was a solar power plant that we built as well, which was the first solar power plant in the region. It was a 10 megawatt plant, which by today's standard is not massive, but if we look at 2009, it was in the top 20 largest plants ever built. And this was our first project as a young startup, kind of co-founded by three guys who had just moved from Canada. So it was a massive undertaking for us as well. At the time, the cost of the 10 megawatt plant was $50 million.
1.5?
Well, 50.
50.
50 million.
Goodness.
Today, that same 10 megawatt plant will cost you somewhere around $5 million.
So 10x cheaper.
Yeah, exactly. And so the decline in the cost of the technology has just really allowed for it to not just be at parity, but well below the cost of gas, oil, and the sources that are currently being used to power the grid in Saudi today. So we're so confident that the economic case, along with the policy, along with the initiatives, the goal of Ndarga to be net zero by 2060, all of these things are clearly aligned and will require, I think, the massive deployment and the expected deployment over the coming decade as well.
You took me exactly into my next point that I noted on this. Maybe I should have done some more research on my own to find out what net zero means, but I'd much rather hear it from a professional.
So, for example, if you produce electricity using a solar panel, that's net zero because you're not producing any carbon from the electricity.
And that's where Saudi Green Initiative comes in, 10 billion trees by 2030.
Exactly.
To offset.
Yes.
Okay, so it's a balance of that. Okay.
So you could sequester carbon, and that's things like planting trees, or literally there's new technologies that are actually pulling carbon and greenhouse gases out of the sky, or at the point of production. And then we inherently have to produce some carbon for day-to-day life, as long as we're still eating meat and we're still I think even driving cars, because it does require energy input to make the batteries, to make the steel, and to do all the things that are required. So net zero is ultimately that, yes, you are sequestering and reducing your carbon footprint, you're sequestering, and you're ultimately not adding carbon to the ecosystem.
Balancing the two. Have you looked into the Saudi Green Initiative? It's really incredible. 10 billion trees to be planted in Saudi from now until the target of 2030. Just a quick read of this. Saudi Green Initiative, SGI, is an ambitious national initiative that is focused on combating climate change, improving quality. Why can't I read it? Saudi Green Initiative, SGI, is an ambitious national initiative that is focused on combating climate change, improving quality of life, and protecting the environment for future generations. Launched in 2021 by MBS, SGI supports Saudi Arabia's ambition to reach a net zero by 2060. 77 initiatives under this, 186 billion and help in funding, 10 billion trees in the coming decades to equal rehabilitation. And you know what? We had a shortage of green spaces in the country. So it hits so many different touch points. With King Salman Park in Riyadh, it is massive. I think it's bigger than Hyde. I think I saw a stat, I'll check, Hyde and Times Square put together. I'm seeing green spaces pop up in Jeddah, but we don't have a central park, which this hits on. Planting 100 billion trees over the next 10 years in Saudi, you will start to see more green spaces, which is something we really need.
Most definitely. And I think sustainably planting those green spaces is critical. And that's what I really appreciate about the depth of the initiative, because it touches not just on planting more trees, but how you plant those trees, what kind of trees they are, the impact it has in terms of carbon sequestering and taking carbon out of the air, and then how it fits into a larger ecosystem, marine conservation, recycling, what we touched on before. So the tripling of recycling between today and 2030 are all part of the same initiative, and they all do go hand in hand. And you see that sustainability is something which is often catalyzed from the top down, but is implemented from the bottom up. And that's what really excites me in what we're doing today and what we see in terms of the general consumer behavior. So you mentioned that you've stopped using plastic in your house. What was the reason why you stopped using plastic?
I wanted to do my part for the country's efforts, the city's efforts, the global efforts to contribute to recycling. I wanted to do my part. Because, I what really bothers me so much in life is when people say, what difference will I make?
Yeah.
I hate that. Because if everyone said, what difference will I make, be it positive or negative, that could be the difference between global warming, life expectancy. It's such an either negative or a very positive remark.
You couldn't be more right. And I think one thing that we've done is, maybe I can give a bit of a background on Wisewell, because Wisewell is a company that in 2017, my solar company got acquired. So Enviromena was acquired by a UK-based pension fund. I had 1 year of remaining as part of the company, and after that, I decided to start my own platform. After 11 years of operating and tons of war stories of doing the first solar project in 7 countries across the region and cutting your teeth in many exciting markets and some interesting environments, I decided I didn't really want to operate anymore. My goal was to invest and really help kind of fuel and seed the future the future cohort of sustainable entrepreneurs in the region trying to take on some large problems. And I was very fortunate. I got connected and invested and was a first investor in the first and very fast growing compost company in the UAE. Super exciting co-founders who are doing amazing things, an incredible energy management company. And I was watching the entrepreneurs do their business. I started getting jealous. And this, kind of fast forward to lockdown and COVID in 2020, I thought to myself, I'd like to build something that has a real impact at the grassroots level. So when we used to build the solar power plants, and some of them were absolutely enormous in scale, it would take years to build, we turned them on and nobody realized that they were getting 4% of their electricity from solar energy while charging their iPhone or watching TV. So the actual, the consumer impact was quite limited, although the carbon impact and I think the sustainability impact was quite high. So I thought to myself, where in kind of the world today of what we do on a daily basis can we actually engage with the end user constantly and at the same time make a massive impact? And the one that just jumped off the page was water. We should be drinking water 8 times a day. We are today, the way we drink and deliver water is completely broken, right? So if you look at the global bottled water sector, it's a $300 billion market growing at 6% a year. So it's going to be close to $400 billion by the end of the decade.
So plastic consumption is not slowing down by any means.
It's growing. It's growing at a very rapid pace.
Is that not a disaster?
It is. It's an absolute disaster. So last year, 140 million barrels of oil equivalent was used just to produce plastic bottles for the bottled water industry. That's an enormous number. And if we actually look at it, somebody is filling a 300 milliliter container that's made out of petrochemicals in Fiji, putting it on a boat, bringing it to all parts of the world. It gets consumed, and then 95% of the time, it just gets thrown out into landfill. So that whole process is just, it's nonsense from a sustainability perspective. It's nonsense from an economic perspective. It's far too expensive for us to be drinking 300 ml at that cost. And then last but not least, and this is a more recent discovery, it has some pretty detrimental impacts in terms of health. A study was just released last week, so it's quite timely, and it was one of the number one trending pieces of news in the US. We had always assumed that water bottles had microplastics in them. And microplastics, basically, the way they were quantified was in 1 liter in a 1 liter bottle of water, we would have around 10,000 microplastics. Now, with these microplastics, quite a bit of research has been done that the compound that's found in the bottles itself is not very harmful in terms of human consumption. Limited data, but it's not evidently dangerous. Using a new technology, a study was reported last week that there's now something called nanoplastics that are found. So instead of having 10,000 particles of plastic, there's actually 240,000 particles of plastic in one liter single-use container.
Great.
And this is a bit scary because it can cross the blood-brain barrier. Testing on mice in labs shows an accumulation of plastic, and the carcinogenic impacts, the health impacts, we're not fully aware of just yet, but it's only been around 20 to 30 years that there's been global adoption of bottled water. Bottled water was a novelty in the kind of generations before us.
Like in the 60s?
Yeah, it was not
How did they drink their water?
It was usually point of use. It was not. It was not the plastic delivered.
It wasn't go to the supermarket and boxes of 24s you put it in the...
No, it wasn't. And you had the gallons to some extent, but it was also just a lot of those actually purification, point of use, and other things as well. But it was not nearly as prevalent.
Is the upside down gallon dispenser just as bad as your 500 ml bottle use?
Yes, in terms of plastics. From a health perspective, you would assume it's quite similar. They're using the same material, the PET plastic. Very often those are at least reused. So if they are reused, then you have a lower environmental impact on the usage of them. But what was kind of staggering was the study came out in terms of health over the last couple of weeks as well. And now we have this kind of perfect storm of, you have a product which filtered water will be better for your health. We don't have to worry about the plastics and microplastics and nanoplastics. Much better in terms of sustainability and at a much lower cost. So what we touched on before, where being green and being clean was a compromise, I don't think it necessarily has to be. And this is what we really designed Wisewell to be around. So we built a water purification company, technology company that was really trying to completely change the way people viewed purification. It's a pretty boring topic if you're going to just talk about it on the basic level. Something goes under your sink, or you look at the top 5 companies globally in terms of water purification, they only represent 25% of the global market. And that's because it's just fragmented, it's localized. Our view is that more could have been built around it, and there's a lot of pain points. One is really building a brand and aesthetic around the water purifier. It used to be hid under your sink or in the pantry, so we wanted to make it sexy. So we took inspirations from the Dysons of the world. So I remember before Dyson made the fan, I'd be pretty embarrassed to have like an old school fan sitting in my living room or whatever, right? It feels a bit, it felt a bit old school to have one of those. But as soon as Dyson built their fan, things changed, right? And I felt that the water cooler, which was often a meeting point at an office, that water cooler conversation, whatever it is, it needed to not be hidden in the pantry anymore. So we designed something that just looked very slick and sexy. And it wasn't just about the external aesthetic design, but it was about what's on the inside. So we have a number of sensors that are testing your water quality from your tap, what happens after the filtration, exactly what's going on with your filters. And then we aggregate all of our users. As you mentioned, what change can I make individually? Your change is actually pretty impactful. The average household in Saudi probably would be reducing around 8,000 single-use plastic bottle containers a year in terms of your usage on a 500 ml basis.
8,000?
Yeah, on a 500, which is the average use of a case. So if you aggregate that on multiple households, it's massive. Now, we delivered our first units around a year ago in Dubai, which was our first market. And in that year, we've displaced 3 million single-use plastic bottles. And it's compounding. So it took us 9 months to displace the first million, and then it took us 4 to get to 2. And we're just constant. We're very quickly.
It's compounding.
It's compounding. And
when you say displaced, Sami, sorry, when you say displaced, do you mean no longer brought into the market because of your solution?
Exactly. So instead of somebody drinking a plastic bottle, they're using
that.
Yeah, they're using that.
So you took it out of existence.
Exactly. We took it out of existence. And that's our goal.
So the water bottle companies are your enemy. They probably see you as the enemy.
They're our peers. They're much larger than we are. We're still a minnow in the ocean, I think, of water. But we see them long term. And it's funny because you touched on something which was often said to us when we started a solar company in Abu Dhabi in 2007. You guys, doesn't that seem like a threat? Doesn't it seem, why would the Gulf want to deploy solar energy? You know, that's against oil and gas. I actually think it's the contrary. I think it's complementary. It's a natural progression. And I would envision, if I am a very large water company and I'm kind of looking at the sustainability case, the economic case, the health case with what's going on today, you want to divert yourself and pivot into the point of use purification as time goes on. So we view them as hopefully long-term peers and partners versus enemies. And that's the same thing that I think we saw with sustainability and renewable energy.
For those trying to figure out what the substitute for plastic is in layman's terms, how would you explain the way of going about it? Like, okay, yeah, I hear what you guys are saying. Plastic is something that we shouldn't be using anymore. Explain to me the alternative.
Okay, so the most common alternative, and I see it in hotels now who are trying to be more sustainable, is they'll put a glass bottle in.
Yes.
The glass bottle does actually alleviate some of the threats from the microplastics, or all of the threats from the microplastics, but it's around 140% more carbon intensive to produce glass and transport glass bottles than it is plastic.
So it's not better.
Weight, and it's 40% more expensive. Yeah, so it's more carbon intensive and at a higher cost. So yes, it does tick a box in terms of I'm not drinking from a plastic bottle. I feel better about myself. But the truth is, it's not going to solve the problem. The way we solve for it is to actually, what comes out of our tap is 99% there. It's that last mile of refining the water. And it's, the technology exists today, but unfortunately in general, it's not presented in a way that is clear to the end user. And so what we've done is we have an app connected to this thing, and it tells you exactly what's going on with your water, how much you've consumed, how much all users have consumed. And it allows people to gain the comfort and take the plunge of going from, I think, plastic consumers. And the behavioral shift of drinking tap water is a very challenging one for many people, right? And what we want to do is really lighten those pain points and make everybody very comfortable that what you're drinking is actually not just equal to, it's better than the alternative.
So it's an invisible solution, filtration system that you won't have to see. It's what's coming out of your taps is clean and good to drink.
So it's actually what we've done is you fill it from the tap, but it's very visible. So we had a very design-led approach. So our unit, and maybe I could show it to you somewhere, but basically it's a standalone water cooler that just looks very design-oriented. It comes in it comes with a very cool design aesthetic, and it's a what's that? So when someone walks in, they'll say, what's that? What does it do? And try to create the conversation.
As per the Dyson fan.
Exactly, as per the Dyson fan. And that's really our goal is that, again, sustainability does not have to be boring and costly. It could be sexy. Right? And that's really what we're trying to push is, and I think Tesla has been a very solid example of that, right? With their vehicles. There are a number of ways to make being clean also be cool, right? And I think that's the key.
No one thought that the electric cars would be that fun, sexy, cool, fast. And they turned the industry on its head in a way that I don't think the other automakers thought that people will jump on that bandwagon. So you got Lucid as well now, which I think looks even better than the Tesla. But it's all about the adoption, right?
Yes.
Are you willing to sell your combustion engine for a battery-powered car, EV? That's the question. Some people are just so happy. So they're just used to, their ways. It was an adjustment for us in the beginning when we said no more plastic bottles in our house. Mm-hmm. And then with time, you would be surprised what you can get used to.
100%. And did it feel like a compromise?
Maybe the first 2 weeks was a bit, where's the plastic bottle? No, you know what, you got to fill up the tin from the dispenser. But it just felt good that we were doing our parts.
Yes.
And it's crazy because, you have any bin in the corner of a room and you'd be surprised how many water bottles can just fill it up in no time.
Yeah.
And just to eradicate that really was a feel-good moment.
Most definitely. And it's again, that's the grassroots impact, right? And those little behavioral changes go a very long way. What makes me very optimistic is you and I sitting here, both 40 something. We're talking about how
I'm just 40.
you're just 40. I'm a little bit older than 40. The difference is the next generation. It's ingrained in them, right?
Yeah.
I think that sustainability is second nature, and part of me feels like in the next decade or so, somebody walking around with a single-use plastic container is going to look a bit like holding a cigarette.
Yeah. I hope so.
From a health perspective, from a secondhand pollution,
Yeah.
smoke perspective, all of that is clearly happening, and there's all these different policy, I would say sustainability, and all these different pressures that are making it happen. And as long as the technology catches up and the user is not compromising, then it's a great change to see.
I see it being taboo.
Yeah.
I see it being like, really, are you still drinking out of that?
Yeah.
And hopefully not in 10 years, hopefully in less than that.
Yeah.
Sustainability. I listened to an interview yesterday. Head of Red Sea Global, he was on Abdullah al-Mudathir's show, which is his number one journalist in Saudi. And he was talking about, with the Red Sea project, there's 90 islands, they're only developing 30, a third of them. And Abdullah said, why? He said, because we need to preserve the marine life. Marine life has reached the islands before us, and we're building on the islands that marine life has not settled on, be it corals, be it turtles, being so forth. Because I've heard it said, actually it was the Crown Prince who said this, he's like, if we don't protect the marine life, there'll be nothing to come and see. It's a beautiful, huge lagoon between Umluj and Al-Wajh, which is it's not Maldivian, it's more Caribbean, where you have that turquoise and the sand, and if you take off in the day from Jeddah and you head north, and I remember like looking out the window 15, 20 years ago, looking at these islands, and I was like, why aren't we taking advantage of this? This is gorgeous. And here we are, where the master plan is 30 hotels. Mm-hmm. 3 of them are open today. Yes. And the number one thing on the top of the list is sustainability. I don't imagine you'll see any plastic or glass bottles there. I'll be interested to know how they consume their water, though. I need to go there.
Yeah, I've seen images, and it looks absolutely stunning. I mean, I think it's as you mentioned, that Caribbean aesthetic of the sea is beautiful, and the architecture of the resorts is so integrated to the nature that it's beautiful. And Red Sea Global as one of the companies or entities that has set a net zero target, and theirs is by 2030. So it's a lot more ambitious. It's around the corner, which means they're doing it today. To be there by 2030, you're pretty close today already. And I don't have in-depth knowledge of what they're doing, but the hospitality sector generally has been a leader in terms of the change and reducing the use of single-use plastics, and the growth of the hospitality sector here, and in areas which are so focused on nature, inherently would lead to some innovative solutions. And it's something that we are constantly looking at. To how do we partner with the hospitality sector? How do we really try to create I remember the first time a lot of people engaged with an espresso machine was in their hotel room. I don't know if you remember that. That was how kind of, and it's a similar thing really. That first time you actually use a proper water filtration device, now have to go get the old fashioned cup, and it can be in the hotel room. And I think that's a really interesting kind of entry point for people to engage with something that's a sustainable behavior. In a very comfortable setting, and hopefully bring it back home with you.
You started Incubayte.
Yes.
Can you tell us what that experience was like?
Sure. So I started Incubayte shortly after selling my solar company. And Incubayte was just a kind of, I'd say, a soft landing into what do I want to do next. And the idea of Incubayte was to invest in funds and businesses at the crossroads of sustainability and technology. And as I touched on before, we're very fortunate to have invested in some really exciting companies and funds that were making an impact and change, mostly around the UAE. And during that period, I was very supportive and hands-on investor, leveraging the experience that I had gained over the decade or so in the solar company, and trying to provide those learnings as well as capital into these new businesses. And as I touched on, that experience was one which was exhilarating to watch entrepreneurs, but also got me itchy. Right? I wanted to be. I wanted to do it. In the board meetings, I was sometimes a bit jealous, right? Which is a strange place to be. And the experience I've had at Incubayte as an investor has been one which I've really appreciated, because watching the journey and being able to, I had some wonderful mentors, and I think I gained a lot of insights from people through my journey over the years, and it really is I would say a blessing to be kind of sitting in the seat now and providing insights and lessons learned to the next generation of I'd say bright-eyed and bushy-tailed entrepreneurs who are very excited and just want to hit the ground sprinting in terms of their opportunities. And my experience with Incubayte is one which I wear two hats. I wear the hat of somebody who heads Incubayte, but I also I'm the founder of Wisewell, and that was a company that we incubated out of Incubayte, which is quite fun. not intentional, but that's how it was launched. And my ability to switch on and off from, I guess, investor to operator is sometimes a challenging skill set, because you need to many times be giving 100% of your time, effort, and focus onto kind of the venture at hand. But at the same time, we do have our other entrepreneurs and other peers that we've invested in and we've supported to date. And that dynamic is one which initially seemed challenging, but as the years have gone on, I'm actually finding that it's incredibly complementary. It is a massive opportunity here in the region when it comes to in investing and taking on sustainability as a sector, but it's also a relatively small network. And there is just so many, I really do believe in the network effect. And so the touch points of our portfolio companies, and some of them are already working with hotels, for example, right? So we actually can leverage the insights and the experience and the relationships of our portfolio companies to try to bring our product forward, right? And so there's this interesting network effect that Incubayte does. And what we always promote, and we've done this for the last few years, is we'll let anyone come to just kind of sit and set up shop, use our offices, and just exchange ideas, because that cross-pollination of entrepreneurs and ideas and investment opportunities, all sitting in the same room together, has a very unique value that you can't really quantify, but you can only feel when you're in the room. And so, we urge anyone to come over to our offices in the IFC and just and let us know what they're up to.
Is Incubayte sector agnostic to sustainability and oil and gas, or is it from?
So we don't really look much at oil and gas. We are sustainability focused. We are sector agnostic. So we'll look at consumer, we'll look at energy generation, we'll look at waste. One thing that I've more recently done, though, and I think as I've become more actively involved and become more and more excited on the opportunities as Wisewell, is we used to want to take a much broader portfolio and invest in dozens of companies. Now we'd like to have a smaller set of companies that we're more actively kind of engaged with and holding hands and trying to grow together. And I think that's just a function of personal time and resources as well.
If I was to ask you, looking back at your favorite failures, one that has taught you the biggest lesson, is there one that you can pinpoint?
I think my favorite failure as the founder of Enviromena at the time, with my co-founders as well, was we were a very kind of young and dynamic set of entrepreneurs and co-founders, and we really believed that we could take on any challenge that was presented in front of us. And at one point, we were presented with an opportunity which was a bit of a change in our business plan that required additional resources. Basically, it took us from a company that was just building solar power plants to owning them as well. And we landed ourselves an opportunity to own a sizable solar power plant. And the guidance of some of our peers and people who had given us fantastic advice throughout the years was, you guys are potentially biting off more than you could chew, and you shouldn't take it on. And so we let that opportunity expire. And although through all three of us as co-founders, we unanimously wanted to pursue this opportunity. We unanimously wanted to do it, but we're like, we're going to take the advice of kind of our board, our peers, and everyone, and we're just going to let this expire. The value of that opportunity that we let go of was actually larger than the company we had built at the time. Now, we grew to be able to fit into that, but it was a massive thing that we walked away from. And for whatever reason, we just didn't question or push hard enough. So because we didn't know enough about that small pivot and change in our business model, we didn't really, we didn't question the advice. And we were quite busy with other things. And that's really one of the reasons why we didn't question, because we were pretty annoying and persistent generally, but we just didn't question it, although we'd always bring it up. We're like, we should take a further look at developing this specific project that was in Jordan at the time. And had we not let it expired, I think we could have been orders of magnitude larger as an organization.
The acquisition of the plant.
The ownership, instead of just building the plant, owning the plant as well, which is just a slightly different, we go from builder to developer, really, at that point. We did that way later on down the road, but had we done it as early as we wanted to, it would have been a seismic shift in terms of our business.
And just so I can understand, you would have then put yourself in a position to be an energy provider?
Yes, exactly. Okay. So instead of just a builder and operator, we were and we did become one 6 years later. Okay. But being involved in the early days in those projects would have been a monumental shift for us. But for whatever reason, we just did not, poke and prod. So now when, we're told by kind of peers, investors, stakeholders, no, you shouldn't do it. That constant questioning, why not? What would be the impact? What's the downside? How do we make sure that if we believe it as founders, if I believe it as a founder, why not do it, right? I think the question is, we're the ones who are by far most in the weeds, seeing everything from a daily basis. And that's something that when I invest in a company, I really give the entrepreneur the benefit of the doubt. I will question their assumptions, but it's something that I've brought with me as an investor now, is giving the flexibility. And my vantage point from a PowerPoint presentation or a Excel spreadsheet is very different than the person who's living and breathing that business on a daily basis. And we took that for granted in the early days, right? You overvalue sometimes
which is rare. Typically people who are more senior than those who are working on something, albeit day to day, think they know more about something than they do. And it's very humble of you. And at the same time, very rare to give the person who is working on it day to day the benefit of the doubt that they might know a thing or two more about it than you do. And when I say one or two, that's like euphemism for a lot more. Throughout your career, have you seen like a common denominator that stops people from achieving their goals?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that's helped me achieve my goals is who I'm surrounded by. And I think the company that you keep and I think the energy of the company that you keep is absolutely critical in terms of being able to accomplish your goals, right? And that's I think that's one, providing the moral support and just the general uplifting to be able to go on and take the plunge of getting into new idea. That's providing the necessary comfort and soft landing if it doesn't work, right? And one thing that I think was instilled in my upbringing by my parents was go out and try it, do it. And they're extremely supportive and enthusiastic. Now, with my wife and even with our family, and we do it with our kids, anytime I come up with a thought or an idea, that degree of support is, when I tell Aya, my wife, oh, I'm thinking about doing this, or we want to do this, she's like, oh, go for it. And it's a very enthusiastic, not, oh, what if this doesn't work? And the actual the support that you get, and I guess I'm trying to think of the right word here, but ultimately the energy, the safety net, right? Yeah. And if it doesn't work, everything's going to be all right. And there have been times where things haven't worked, right? Whether it's an investment or a specific project or opportunity, but knowing that safety net of those who surround you are there is great. And it's not just a safety net, but it's also the ability to bounce the ideas off of your network. So I'm again very fortunate to have a group of friends and peers who all come from different backgrounds and experiences, who could provide insight on the different opportunities, and that really gives you the confidence. And it goes almost back to the multiculturalism and diversity of backgrounds. If you ask a large number of people from different backgrounds, but you have a deep respect for, and they have deep insights and real honesty with you, it really helps validate and test and experiment very quickly. And those experiments happen as a small conversation with your co-founder, your family member, your wife, your investors, and those little experiments are what get you towards your goal. And I think that's a constant evolution, and just having that support system is critical. And ultimately, if you don't have that, and you have naysayers around you, or for whatever reason you can't find the right people to talk to give you the confidence to jump into a new idea, makes it very challenging. It's a very daunting task to change a career, or to try to start something new, or take on a new project. And conversations are necessary, and conversations happen with your social set around you, and that's critical in terms of achieving a goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we should be getting happier with age, because you, through the process of elimination, will know what doesn't work for you.
Yes.
And what does work for you. And I really do believe that we are the average of the 5 people closest to us. Now, people think it's the 5 human beings closest to you. Actually, I disagree with that. You need to factor into that the content that you consume. So I listen to a lot of Tim Ferriss. I listen to a lot of Lex Huberman. Like, there isn't an episode that Tim would release that I wouldn't watch in the next 2 or 3 days, for many reasons.
Yeah.
To become a better listener, to pick up on words that I would have never come across, and to learn more about subjects that I know nothing about. So that plays into the content you consume, plays into you are the average of the 5 closest people to you. The happiest, or what would you say the best advice is that you've received that you are glad that you did not listen to?
The best advice I've received that I did not listen to was probably slow down. Right. And I think on many occasions, you're taking on so many things, and as an individual, curiosity is abundant, and I generally can get I'm not bored easily, but I think I can become uncomfortable if something becomes stagnant in terms of whether it's in something in business or life or health or whatever it is. I think there's just constant movement is something that keeps me very comfortable. And on many occasions, it's like, just stop and really try to assess everything, and then you'll figure it out by stopping. And to be honest, for me, movement is how I figure things out. So constantly trying to learn, to pick things up, to try little things, micro experimentation. That's all quite critical in terms of things. So slow down works for many, and it's a great piece of advice. But for whatever reason, so far I haven't felt that.
I would agree with you, because the people around you are not stopping; they're moving. Yeah. And if you stop, you're going backwards.
Yeah,
I think movement is what's the old saying? Motion creates emotion.
Yeah,
and if you are stagnant, you're actually going backwards because people around you are chipping away. So I would absolutely agree with you on that. 5 years from now, what is something that you really want to make a reality?
5 years from now.
Yeah. What's your number one goal in life now for your next 5 years?
So I think, there's many layers to that. So impact is what I want to do in 5 years. And I think as I've aged, I've realized that time is finite. And when you are spending time with family or friends, or spending time working on something, or spending time with your children, how you approach that time is absolutely critical. And being impactful in what you're doing, and this could be in the sense of my hours spent, how much change will they make with my company, for example? Should I spend 5 hours having a small internal meeting about little things, or should we go try to do something massive, right? And that's one side of it. With my children, it's probably the one where I think it's most interesting, because I look back to my early conscious memories, and my eldest son is 5, so I think he's going to start getting into the conscious memory in the next few years. There are events. I remember one time my father took me fishing, or I went on a road trip with my parents to Florida. And those memories actually stick in there, ingrained in you. So I want to start creating and catalyzing these memories, which I'm sure are hugely formative, and are things that, we only have a certain window to implement these things, and you never get them, you don't get that chance to do it again. So having positive impact, and the time that I'm spending on all the different parts of my life and prioritizing is the goal.
It's a challenge though. I think it's probably one of the biggest stresses for fathers today, to distribute their time between work and spending time with their children. Yeah. How do you, I struggled a lot when I was in corporate, and the podcast and the kids and all I wanted to do, my dream, which alhamdulillah is reality today. I said the podcast and everything that goes into it is a job on its own, and 3 children requires a lot of time as well. I can't put a third thing on my plate. Yes. And podcast and kids, and my day is full. Mm-hmm. And just to be able to balance between the two is tricky, and wow, if you can get that close to right as possible, it's a great feeling.
Yeah, I understand. I don't, my view is there's no such thing as right. And I think it's just, as you mentioned, we are probably most impacted by the 5 people and or what we consume as the 5 as the most. And that's, as parents, we can have tremendous input in terms of our children's early development years, but really who you end up sitting beside in class, or on a bus, or on an airplane, or wherever it may be, can have a massive impact on
who your friends are.
And who your friends are. And so really, I think, for me, this goal is just being able to plant the seeds of these early memories and these early developmental points in time and in life that hopefully will be, thought back when they look back in 30 years, 40 years. So I remember when when we did this, and look back on things with a smile, because that's really all it is. And when you fast forward decades up.
It's funny, when we're young, it's like we want to be adults, and then when you're an adult, you're like, where can I go just to get away from it all right now? And be a kid again, right?
Yeah, I often look at the kid's life and I'm quite envious. It seems quite exciting. Yeah,
you guys have it good. Grass is never green.
Yeah,
grass is greener where you water it. Is a saying I love.
That's a great saying.
Thanks, Sami. Does that cover everything that we wanted to touch on? You more optimistic or pessimistic, looking into the future in the next 50 years for mankind, energy consumption? I know we just had COVID, which was like no one obviously saw that coming. But then you look back I just think when people think that there's just more, I'm going to swear for the first time, shit happening in the world right now than ever before, I just think we're just more interconnected and news travels more. Because the Spanish flu in 1920 killed 50 million people.
Yes.
And COVID killed a lot less than that. Is fear-mongering a real thing that makes the current times feel scarier, which means the future is going to be scarier?
I'm incredibly optimistic about technology's contribution to solving problems in the future. So we are on a planet with limited resources historically, but we can actually now create resources on our planet, right? And that's, being able to farm where you couldn't farm before, being able to produce electricity on a piece of desert, right? Being able to, to preempt medicine in terms of, right now there's incredible advancements in diagnostics and such things. So there are so many different sectors that are being positively inputted, positively influenced by technology, that my only fear, and I don't think it's actually a fear, but my only question is, okay, well, if technology is doing all this for us, what do we do, right? And I'm curious, right? I don't.
You want to say replace jobs, right?
I don't think it'll replace.
That's a fear, no?
I don't think it'll replace jobs. It'll create different jobs. But what are those jobs? And it's a question I wonder. I mean, what should our kids study today, right? Because really understanding what technology will be able to do in the next 15 to 20 years when they enter the workforce is a very challenging thing because of the pace of the change. Will opportunity exist? My gut feeling is absolutely. What it looks like is very, very challenging to predict.
In the 13 years that I worked in a lubricant company, in our production line in 2010, there were 30 people in our factory. When I left in 2023, so 13 years, the factory went from 30 to 4 or 5 people, which told me that many jobs got replaced by tech.
The factory did, but what happened to the rest of the organization? Were jobs created in other parts as well? It grew. Yeah, it grew. Right. So you're probably net positive. And I remember back in the day before the word processor, and I'm probably dating myself, but there were typing rooms. There were rooms of people that would type up documents. The removal of the typing room actually led to further job growth and job creation. The same thing with most technological innovations that happen.
Social media created jobs, created departments.
Most definitely. And it created a person who knew how to bake a good cookie could suddenly become a real business owner, right? And from home. And there's tremendous opportunity that was not when Instagram or when Facebook was first released. Nobody thought that the use case was going to be the ability for people with niche talents or the ability to bake a good cookie to become a big distributor or a Mr. Beast to be created, right? Yeah. It's a very, very interesting thing. And I think ultimately technology will create uncertainty, but will create a lot more solution than uncertainty in the long term.
Yeah, convenience.
Yeah.
I mean, why didn't we think of Uber in the 90s? I mean, the taxi, just going back to I always had bad experiences in New York. It's yellow cat.
Oh, me too.
I'm always getting into arguments, and I'm a very peaceful guy. But these guys were just rude, and they try to rip you off when they find out you're not a New Yorker. And now it's like they don't know if you can't tell if you can't tell the difference between an Uber and a private driver. Like the experience is incredible, and it's cashless.
Yes.
And there's a rating system, so they want to be treated. You're going to treat them well, so that you can give them a good review. And later, I found out that we, as consumers of Uber, are rated ourselves.
Yes.
So,
how's your rating?
Yeah, no, very good actually. Yeah, I'm like 4.6. Thank you.
That's good. That's very good.
So like tech, yeah. where there is convenience. Where you'll find convenience, you will find the solutions, you will find the funding, you will find ease. And tech really, if used for the right reasons, comes with more good than bad.
Most definitely. And I think that's, just to touch on that, the Uber example. Uber was meant to become the taxi killer, right? And actually what happened was people in their free time suddenly were able to have a new form of income. So there's a massive benefit in terms of the freelance worker and their ability to have a gig. And that was one of the catalysts of the gig economy, I would say. In addition to that, there has not been a reduction in demand of taxis. Actually, taxis are now available on the Uber app. So it just broadened and made the entire process more convenient. So it does add benefit to that. And it all actually stems from the invention of the iPhone, right? And the development of the iPhone. So without the iPhone, we wouldn't have had the Uber, right?
Do it on an Ericsson.
And exactly, right? And I think that's why we couldn't do it in the 90s. We could just play Snake. And I think if we fast forward to, again, today and what you had touched on with energy is this is another input that's going to create tremendous amounts of convenience, right? And that's on the food systems. That is on the water systems, that is on technology and artificial intelligence and processing power. This input, which is energy, which we are blessed with an abundance of here in Saudi and in the broader region, really can be a massive differentiator for us in terms of what we're inputting it into and what we get out of it. And there's so many programs ahead of us, and there's just a young population that's all kind of been holding back and is now sprinting right across. That is fantastic, and I'm very optimistic about that kind of marriage of energy, technology, and entrepreneurship to see the potential and the change over the next 20 years.
Absolutely. I think it was Rogan has said back in the hunter-gatherer days, you used to walk 20,000 steps for your meal. And then in the 80s and 90s, it was like 5,000 steps for your meal because you have to walk to the car, from the car to the mall to the restaurant. And we're just, maybe the only negative is that we're walking less because things are being delivered to our doorstep.
Exactly. But now we count our steps.
And now we count our steps. And I think it's very important to be aware of how many steps you're taking, because right now, with the convenience of life, you can easily fall into the trap of getting an abysmal 1,000 steps per day.
Yeah.
Anything under 15, I am unhappy. And in Saudi, it's much harder to get your steps in because we're not a very pedestrianized culture. In London, 15K before noon, no problem. But movement, it's crazy how important it is. And I just don't want tech to be the reason for less movement and the less health and the less life expectancy.
And, it's interesting because the conversation of how many steps we take would have never existed without technology.
Correct.
So, until I had this watch on that was telling me how many I took was not even a concept. So the fact that it's turned into a concept and we realize we have to take, and we should be taking 10,000 steps or whatever your goal is a function of technology. So used for good and I think pushed in the right direction, it helps.
The measurement, what gets measured gets managed.
Yeah.
Thanks, brother.
Thank
for
you.
everything. I really appreciated your time. I love how your MO or just mission in life is something that is so important for, the world that we're going to leave behind for our kids and our kids' kids. Sustainability, taking care of the planet. You always hear we have one, that's it, right? So whether it's recycling, whether it's net zero, whether it's sustainability, whether it's something as simple as changing the way you operate your household from plastic bottles to drinking out of a filtration system, I think we can all be doing more, and I'm on the top of that list, that we can do more to create a cleaner environment, a healthier earth. So I really salute you for the good that you are doing to our world. And I just enjoyed hearing what you had to say about it from the professional that you are and the experiences that you've been through, pitfalls, successes, and everything else that you have been through in your illustrious career.
Thank you very much, Mo, and thank you for providing people a platform to speak on what they're doing and the experiences, because listening to your show and I think listening to the experience and the diversity of backgrounds that you bring to the table is incredibly inspirational, right? And thank you.
Appreciate that. I'm still looking, on the subject of diverse guests, I'm still looking for a bird watcher, professional one. So if anyone hits your desk.
I have a friend who's invested in a bird watching company.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's close.
You're serious? Yeah.
Digital bird watcher. Okay, it's a birdhouse with so we could probably get the founder of that birdhouse company.
Yes, please do. You just gave me an idea. I think at the end of every episode, I'm going to ask my guest to recommend someone from industry X.
I have not met them, so I can't vouch, but I can definitely say it's a cool idea.
Whatever you can do.
Yeah.
Send us an email or we'll reach out to them.
Done.
Thanks a lot, Sam.
Thank you.
All the best.
Oh,
brother.
thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.